My husband thinks that since I went through a difficult labor, giving our daughter his ex's name, as his mother wanted, was a way to help me carry less of a burden, but I took a burden off myself by removing it from the birth certificate. Hi, I'm 28 years old, female, and I had a difficult pregnancy from the very start. Besides the typical complications you can have during pregnancy, I had a rare condition, so rare it doesn't even have a name yet. But I know it affects some women, and I hope this post helps bring attention to it so one day it might get a name. It's a condition caused by a mother-in-law and a husband who enjoy complicating things. Because apparently giving them a grandchild and a son isn't enough, they had to twist the knife in the worst possible moment with their demands. My husband, 30, and I were excited for the baby, but my body didn't handle the pregnancy well. I was constantly nauseous, dizzy, and hospitalized twice for dehydration. It wasn't one of those beautiful, glowing pregnancies where you look like a model, no. And like I said, those weren't the only complications. At first, my husband was attentive, or at least I thought he was. He took me to doctor's appointments, brought me food, even handled some chores at home. I didn't realize his support had limits until everything fell apart at the hospital. My husband and I have been married for 4 years. We met in college and things moved fast. He had an ex-girlfriend named Lily, same age as him. They dated for almost 5 years and were even engaged, but broke up 6 months before I met him. He always said it was mutual and they just weren't compatible. I believed him. But even after we got married, his mother, a harpy of a woman I'll call Carol, kept bringing up Lily from time to time. She would say things like, "I always thought Lily was the one for my son," or "Lily this, Lily that." At first my husband defended me, telling her to knock it off. At home he reassured me that his mom just liked Lily and that I had nothing to worry about, that she was just stuck in the past. She's not even that old, but since he defended me, I let it go. Fast forward to the day I gave birth, the day I literally told the nurses to get whoever they needed and just get the baby out because I couldn't take it anymore. Not because I didn't want her, but because it was already so hard just reaching motherhood. I was 37 weeks along, so it wasn't premature. My water broke early that morning and my husband drove me to the hospital. Things got scary very quickly. Labor was intense, I started bleeding heavily, and the doctors rushed me in for an emergency C-section. I hemorrhaged and lost consciousness. They transferred me to the ICU right after delivery, and later told me I had nearly died. So no, my experience wasn't one of those pretty, smiling, photo-ready births. That's why I'm so angry about what happened next. I don't remember much from those hours. I was in and out of consciousness, hooked up to machines, heavily medicated. Thankfully, our daughter was born healthy. She was small, around 3 kilograms, but her APGAR score was perfect. The nurses kept saying she was a fighter. My husband was the first to hold her while they worked on me. Months earlier, I had told him I wanted us to choose her name together. We had narrowed it down to 3 names we both liked: Nora, Hazel, and Eliana. When I woke up properly for the first time in the ICU, my throat was sore and I could barely talk. My husband came in looking nervous and excited at the same time, like a cat that stole something from the kitchen and didn't want to get caught. I was too weak to ask questions, and he just told me to rest, that the baby was fine. I didn't think much of it at first, just felt relieved she was okay. But the next day, when they moved me to a regular maternity room, I finally got to see my daughter properly. The nurse brought her in, and on the bassinet there was a little tag with her name. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The tag said Lily. You know whose name that is. And you know it wasn't one of the names we had agreed on. It was my mother-in-law's choice. At first I thought it had to be some kind of sick joke. I have nothing personal against Lily, but there was no way I was giving my daughter my husband's ex's name. When I asked the nurse if it was a mistake, she said no, the father had already signed the birth certificate, and the grandmother had helped with the naming since I was unconscious. My husband walked in right after, holding a coffee, as if he hadn't just done the most idiotic and disrespectful thing in the world. I couldn't even look at him. My voice was still weak, and I was in pain. But I managed to ask him if he really had given our daughter his ex's name. He looked cornered, like he had no idea how to lie properly, and said he thought it was a beautiful name, and that it would have been too much to wait until I woke up and decided while being so sick. Carol had suggested the name, and he said he thought it was nice to accept it. Nice would have been me having enough strength to chase them all over the hospital in a gown with something heavy in my hand that wouldn't break after the first hit. I'd need to keep swinging after the first blow. Sorry if I sound a little aggressive with these comments, but this is what comes out when you spend hours in a brutal labor and then a mommy's boy does whatever his mother tells him. As far as I remember, he married me, not his mother. His mother wasn't the one pregnant with his child. I almost died giving birth, and at the exact moment when I couldn't speak for myself, he decided it was the perfect time to let his mom name our daughter after his ex. Not just any ex, the ex his mother always wanted him to marry. He even had the audacity to say he thought he was taking a burden off me. As if naming my own child was some kind of chore, as if he was doing me a favor by stealing that decision from me. The only burden I wanted to take off was his head from his body, because clearly he wasn't using it properly. I was trembling, maybe from the meds, barely able to hold my baby for more than a few minutes, and yet there I was, forced to process this incredible betrayal. I couldn't even get up and leave. I was trapped in that hospital bed with stitches, bruises, and emotional wreckage. The nurses kept calling the baby Lily, and every time they said it, it felt like a slap in the face. Each mention of that name shoved me further out of my own life. Carol came to visit later that day with a smug little smile that said, "I won." Like, you can't do anything, you're stuck there helpless. She twisted the knife even more, gushing about how beautiful the baby's name was, how perfect it was. I wanted to throw the hospital remote at her, but I only had one shot, and then I'd be out of weapons to defend myself. What made everything worse was how my husband kept downplaying it, like it wasn't a big deal. He said I was just being emotional. Surprise, that happens when someone literally almost dies in childbirth. He acted like the name didn't matter, that we could always change it later, like it was some placeholder. As if it wasn't a giant neon reminder that he still had lingering feelings for someone else, someone his mother openly wished he had married instead of me. I couldn't talk to anyone right away. My parents live out of state and couldn't travel because of a snowstorm. My best friend had just had her own baby and was recovering too. I felt completely alone and powerless. The only good thing during that time was being able to think about what I was going to do next. When the nurse asked me if I wanted to confirm the birth certificate details, I requested a change. I hadn't been in the right mental state before, and I wasn't going to let that name be official. I filled out the paperwork to correct it and decided to also remove my husband's name. He hadn't acted like a father, a husband, or even a decent son. He didn't care that his mother was making decisions as if she was the baby's mother. I checked the box for no father and signed everything as a single mother. My husband barely visited me while I was recovering, and when he did, he acted as if nothing had happened, as if I should be grateful. His mother Carol, with that mocking smile, brought clothes, told the nurses what the baby needed, and kept referring to her as her Lily. I stayed silent, not letting on yet what I had done, because I didn't want them to try to snatch my baby away once I was discharged. My husband found out I had changed the certificate and removed his name. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel his anger simmering. A few days later he exploded, saying I had embarrassed him, made him look useless, and ruined what his mom had planned. He never once asked me how I felt, never cared that I had almost died, or that I was still in pain. It was all about how he looked. Carol was even worse. She left a long message calling me selfish, saying I had ruined the baby's life by not giving her a complete family. She accused me of punishing my husband and depriving her granddaughter of him, calling me a bad mother for starting drama over just a name. If it was just a name, they could have used one of the ones we had actually chosen together. My husband said he only wanted to be involved again if I put his name back on the certificate, kept the name Lily, and allowed Carol free visits. That was never going to happen. I told him if he wanted rights, he'd have to go to court. I wasn't handing over anything to a man who made choices for his mommy instead of supporting his wife. He said I was being dramatic and acting like a single mom, so I said, fine. Then I will be. At least I'll be a single mom who protects her daughter. I legally changed our daughter's name to Hazel, the name I had originally chosen. It felt like taking back control of my life. Like reclaiming my baby as mine, not as some symbol of my husband's past relationship, and not as my mother-in-law's trophy. Now my husband is angry, and Carol tells everyone that I'm unstable. Some members of his family think naming our daughter after his ex wasn't that big of a deal, but none of them were the one lying there, bleeding and unconscious, while someone else made a permanent decision about my baby. I'm doing this alone now. It's not easy, I'm tired all the time and still recovering, but I don't regret what I did. I look at Hazel and feel peace. I don't feel rage when I say her name. I know this will complicate things with my husband, he's already talking about lawyers. But I'm not afraid. I did what I had to do for me and for my daughter. So now I ask, am I the bad one for taking my husband's name off our daughter's birth certificate and listing myself as a single mother after he and his mom named our baby after his ex while I was in the ICU? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I decided to take my husband off the birth certificate and rename my daughter instead of giving her my husband's ex's name. I need to tell you what's happened since then. First, let's talk about people's opinions. I think most agreed with changing the name, and I haven't seen many people saying it wasn't a big deal to name my child after his ex. But when it comes to removing my husband from the certificate, not so much. That opinion was more divided. Some people think it's unfair to my husband because she's his daughter too. Others pointed out that now I can't claim child support. Honestly? My peace of mind is more important than whatever child support I could get from him. On the other hand, he always has the option to go to court and demand to be included. If he does, at least it'll show he wants to be a father, not just slap his ex's name onto our child in some twisted way. Because yes, it is twisted to name your daughter after your ex. They're supposed to be different relationships, different loves. It's wrong on so many levels. And for the person who said I only did this because I'm afraid my husband will find out the baby isn't his, I have no problem taking a DNA test. If that were true, I'd be doing him a favor by removing all obligations. Don't you think Reddit should require an intelligence test before commenting? Anyway, back to the update. He had been telling mutual friends that I was just being emotional and would change my mind in a few days. But when it became clear I wasn't going to, he got angrier. Carol blew up my phone with messages for days. I stopped responding after a few because it was always the same, how I was ruining the family, how cruel I was, how I was hurting her son. She never once asked how I was after nearly dying in childbirth. She never even mentioned Hazel, except to say that she was her granddaughter and she had every right to name her whatever she wanted. No, lady. I was the one who gave birth. That means I had the right to name her. My husband too, but he lost that right when he did something this sick. Last week, my husband packed a few things and left without saying much. He's staying with Carol now. I didn't ask him to leave, he made that choice himself. I think he expected me to chase after him or maybe apologize. But I didn't. I was too tired to deal with his ego. Honestly, the silence was a relief. The apartment felt peaceful for the first time in months. I could finally breathe. Hazel and I started to settle into a routine. She's a calm baby, thankfully. I think she's as exhausted from the pregnancy as I am, so she's born as the chillest little person I know. She wakes up every few hours but calms down quickly. I've been slowly recovering, physically and mentally. I'm still sore, still exhausted, but at least I don't have to deal with someone making me feel like I don't matter. In the first few days after he left, I heard from some of his cousins and a mutual friend. Some were clearly sent by Carol. They said things like, "Your husband is heartbroken, you're being unfair to your daughter by keeping her away from him." Others tried to be more neutral, saying they hoped we could work it out. I didn't argue with anyone. I just said I was focusing on Hazel right now. Which was the truth. I'm documenting all of this. You never know what you might need in the future. Carol thinks I'm doing nothing, that she's got the upper hand. But the truth is, I've been preparing in silence. That's the best way to deal with people like this, because eventually they crumble on their own. My husband hasn't contacted me once to check on Hazel. Not once has he asked for a photo, an update, nothing. The only message I've gotten from him since he left was a short text that said, "We need to talk about my rights." That was it. No asking how the baby is, just about his rights. I replied once, saying that if he wanted to go the legal route, he could. I wouldn't stop him. I haven't heard from him since. Hazel's name change was approved. Her name is now officially Hazel, the name I had chosen before all the drama. I can't even describe how much better it feels to say her name out loud. It makes me feel proud. I know this won't be easy. I've accepted that I'll be doing this alone for a while, maybe forever. But it's not as scary as I thought it would be. I've had help from a couple of friends. A coworker who's also a single mom gave me baby clothes and frozen meals. Another friend checks in every day to make sure I'm eating properly. Those little things have made a big difference. My parents will finally be traveling soon, and my mom might stay for a while. Some people have asked if I'll ever go back to my husband, and the answer is no. Not after what he did. Not after letting his mother name our baby while I was unconscious, and then getting mad at me for being upset about it. I don't trust him. And trust is everything when you're raising a child. He can be Hazel's father, he can take the legal route, and I won't refuse things like DNA testing. But our relationship died that day. I've also been thinking about what I'll say to Hazel someday when she's older and asks why her dad isn't in her life, if he decides not to fight for anything. I want to be able to tell her the truth, without anger. Edit, I didn't mention this before, but I'm pursuing divorce. The problem is that in my state, there's a grace period after giving birth before you can file, so I can't do it immediately. Update 2. Something happened over the weekend, and I can't stop thinking about it. 2 weeks after my husband left to stay with his mom, he showed up at my door. It was early Saturday morning. Hazel was still asleep in her bassinet. I was sitting on the couch in my robe, messy hair, eating toast, completely unprepared for drama. When I heard the knock, I assumed it was a delivery. Instead, it was my husband. I froze in the doorway, completely shocked. He didn't look great either, but at least I had the excuse of not expecting anyone. He didn't ask for permission to come in, just said he wanted to talk. At first, I said nothing. I think he expected me to yell or slam the door, but instead I just stepped aside and let him speak. He started by saying he had ruined everything. That he hadn't realized how serious things were until I made it official, removing his name, changing Hazel's name, shutting him out completely. He said the last 2 weeks without us had made him reflect on everything he did wrong. He admitted he never should have let his mom name Hazel, that he froze when the nurses asked and didn't know what to do, and when Carol stepped in, he just let it happen. He said he was scared and overwhelmed and thought he was doing the right thing. Then he apologized. And it sounded genuine, not just something to smooth things over. Not that it changes my decision, but at least he said it. He said he was sorry for not defending me, for not protecting my voice when I couldn't speak for myself, for letting Carol steamroll me in the hospital, and for disappearing when I needed him most. He said he never meant to hurt me, that he didn't realize how awful it all was until he saw his name missing from the birth certificate. He asked if there was any way to fix things. I told him Hazel was fine, I was fine, and we were figuring things out without him. I didn't say I forgave him, but I appreciated the apology. He sat there awkwardly for a while, then asked if we could talk more. I let him in, mainly because I wanted him to see that Hazel was fine without him, that I was surviving even though he probably thought I'd crumble. He sat on the edge of the couch, looking around like the apartment had changed without him. It hadn't, it just felt different now that he was gone. He asked what he could do. I told him that if he really wanted to be in Hazel's life, he'd have to prove it, not with words or apologies, but with actions. He asked if that meant lawyers. I said probably yes. I wasn't going to open my door every few days just for him to pop in and out. Hazel deserves better than that. I told him I'd be willing to discuss a parenting plan. But only once he started therapy and took real responsibility. Real responsibility, not a sad speech on my doorstep. He said he understood. He asked if he could at least send things for the baby or help with bills. I told him no, not for now. Not because I wanted to be spiteful, but because I need space. I don't trust him yet. He left when things got hard, and now he came back because the silence scared him. That doesn't mean he's ready to step up. He left after about an hour. He didn't try to push me. He just said he'd stay in touch and hoped I'd let him know when I was ready to talk more. Since then, he sent a couple of short messages, just checking on how we're doing. Which is already more than he did before. Carol, of course, found out, and now she's back in full force. She sent me a long text about how families fight and I should focus on healing, not punishing. I didn't even bother to read the rest. She's blocked. She doesn't see that she had a huge part in all of this. She hasn't apologized, and she doesn't realize that talking only makes things worse. It's not like my husband isn't an adult, he is responsible for his choices. But she acts as if none of this is her fault. I don't know what will happen with my husband. Maybe he'll really try to change. Maybe he'll disappear again. Maybe we'll end up in court. Or maybe we'll figure out some way to co-parent from a distance. For now, I'm making no promises, to him or to myself. I'm just focusing on Hazel, one day at a time. If my husband wants to earn a place in Hazel's life, he can. But he has to understand, I'm not the same person I was. I'm not the scared, exhausted woman lying in a hospital bed letting others make decisions for me. I'm Hazel's mother, and no one can take that from me. Update 3. I think it's been about a month since my husband showed up at my door saying he wanted to fix things. And now I know for sure, I'm over him, over this mess, and over waiting for him to be someone he's not. After that visit, my husband kept sending short messages every few days. Just little things like "Hope Hazel's doing well" or "Thinking of you too." Nothing intense, but enough to show he wasn't disappearing again. Then about a week ago, he asked if we could meet in person again. I said okay, and we agreed to meet somewhere other than my place while my mom stayed with Hazel. She's moved in for a while to help me. He arrived early and brought flowers. I didn't take them, because I didn't want him thinking I was opening the door for reconciliation. He looked nervous again, like he didn't know how things would go. I sat down, ordered a coffee, and told him we had 30 minutes. No games. He started by saying he'd begun therapy. Only 2 sessions so far, but he was serious about it. He talked about how he realized he had a habit of shutting down when things got hard, and how his relationship with Carol was much more controlling than he'd admitted. He said she had always made decisions for him while he was growing up, and part of him thought letting his mom name Hazel was normal, like she was just helping. He said he now understood how wrong that was. That I should have been the one involved in naming our daughter, not his mom. And definitely not with the name of an ex. He said he was ashamed of how he handled everything, from the hospital to leaving, to not defending me. I listened. Let him say it all. Then I told him I appreciated the apology, but it wasn't enough, not if he expected us to get back together. I couldn't go back to him and just hope something like this would never happen again. He looked hurt, but he didn't argue. He asked if he could still be part of Hazel's life. I said yes, but only if he stuck with therapy, showed up consistently, and understood that everything now happens on my terms. No Carol. No drama. No surprise visits. I told him if he wanted custody or official visitation, we could go through the court. But if he wanted to slowly, respectfully, and safely earn a place in Hazel's life, I was willing to work on that, with time, effort, and proof he was serious. He agreed. Said he understood. We finished our coffee in silence, then I stood up, thanked him for meeting, and left. Since then, my husband has followed through. He sent me a screenshot showing he booked 4 more therapy sessions. Today he asked for photos of Hazel and if he could visit next week, supervised, for a short time. I know some people have told me not to let him back into Hazel's life, that it's dangerous or whatever. I could make this harder for him. But the reality is that if this goes to court, it's very likely we'll be given shared custody. I've already discussed this with my lawyer. So I have two paths. Be the difficult ex-wife and create a toxic relationship, or try to make the best out of all this. That doesn't mean that if tomorrow he does something wrong, I won't fight tooth and nail, but there's not much I can do right now. Going for full custody would be a lost battle from the start. There's nothing that legally justifies it, and it would only worsen our bond. I'd gain nothing, and Hazel would grow up with two parents constantly at war. We'll see how this develops, but for now, that's what I have to offer. Update 4. This is just an update on my life right now that the divorce is finalized. These past few months have been constant changes, but I'm finally adjusting to the new life. The papers were filed after the required waiting period following my daughter's birth. My ex also filed to be included on Hazel's birth certificate. That's the summary, here are the details. My mom stayed with me for a while until she had to return to my dad, her own baby. And I don't say that because he literally depends on her, but because he could live off pizza if my mom weren't around. If she had stayed much longer, she'd probably have had to put him on a diet and exercise routine, which, for him, would mean rolling him around the neighborhood to lose some weight. Still, my mom stayed long enough to help me get things in order, find someone who could watch Hazel so I could return to work. My ex-husband didn't fight the divorce. He agreed to split everything evenly. That was the first sign he truly cares about his daughter and wants to be a responsible father. The second was his request to be added to our daughter's birth certificate. He'll pay child support during these years when Hazel still primarily needs her mother. But once she grows and doesn't depend on me as much, those payments will stop, because we arranged shared custody. The third, and most important, sign, he's cut his mother out of his life. And not just a simple "I won't text you" or "I blocked you." No, he's completely cut her off. He's even told family and friends what happened, to the point where his mom has turned it into her personal crusade, ranting about how her own son, her own blood, chose to forgive me. The story behind all that is a little long, and I don't think it's my place to share it. Maybe my ex will want to write his own post someday. But I can say that his mother involved his ex, Lily, in this whole mess, with disastrous consequences for her. Because Lily found out what happened and was horrified to learn about the hospital situation. Let's just say my ex-Mil won't be posting on social media for a while. And let's also say that the name Lily doesn't sound nearly as appealing to her anymore. So, there are strong signs that my daughter won't grow up anywhere near that grandmother. Of course, I'll be staying vigilant in case anything ever happens in the future. If it does, I'll update. But if not, this may be the last post. Though I'll still be here, reading and responding to comments.